So here are the materials that I'll be using for the short Ankara Shift dress. I have my Ankara 2 yards, but you can use 2 to 3 yards. I have pieces of Ankara here that I'll be using for patchwork and my Ankara bands. I have my thread, my tailor's chalk, my pins, my tape measure, my seam ripper just in case I need to rip any seams, and my scissors. So I've cut the Ankara out. I'm just cutting off the last piece of pattern, but here are my 2 pieces, my back piece and my front piece. So you cut your Ankara on fold. I didn't write that earlier, but you cut it on fold. And since there's no zip, we're going to cut both pieces, the back piece and the front piece on fold. You start with your back and then your front. I'm going to start by sewing facing to the front and back necklines. This is to make sure that our neckline has a very smooth finish and it doesn't look rough. The facing is going to be cut by 4 inches. I want to make it 4 inches thick so that when you turn it in, it won't be coming off. So this is the facing for the front. So this is the back with the facing sewn on it, and this is our front, which we're about to sew the facing on. When you're sewing your facing to the dress piece, you have to make sure that you place them right side facing right side. So the side that we have marked as the wrong side or as the back of the Ankara, you have to make sure that the right side of the Ankara and the right side of the dress are facing each other. And this is our neckline with the facing sewn on it and turned backwards. Now I'm going to sew the shoulders by placing the front and the back piece right side facing right side, and then placing the shoulders to align together so I can sew everything at once. I'll be using this technique to sew the shoulder seam so that I'll be able to hide the seam in between the fabric. I don't want it to show when you turn the dress inside out, so I'm using this technique to hide the seam. I'm going to be using the same technique for both shoulders. You can actually just sew your shoulder the way I'm holding it like this. Just take out your 0.5 inches and then you sew, but I choose to do this because I want to hide my shoulder seam. And of course my pins, I always pin to hold seams in place before I sew them. It makes life so much easier. Now I've sewn my shoulders and I'll turn them right side out so that I can sew my sleeves to the armhole. I'm going to be using the notch that I did earlier on the sleeve. That notch is going to be what I will align my sleeve to the shoulder seam. I'm going to be pinning the notch to the shoulder seam so that I know that when I'm starting my sewing, I'm going to be starting from the middle of the sleeve and the middle of the armhole so that I have a perfectly aligned sleeve. Same thing I'm going to be doing for the other armhole, and I'm going to be aligning the notch, the sleeve notch, with the shoulder seam, and I'm also going to start sewing from the middle to the sides. Now I've sewn my sleeve in. Make sure that your sewing is always right side facing right side when you're sewing. Next, I'm going to be sewing my band to my sleeve hemline, and I'm going to be folding the band by 2 so that I can have a smooth edge to finish off with. So I'm going to be placing this on the inside of the seam, then I would sew straight. Then after sewing, I'll turn it around and then sew. Same thing I'll do for the other sleeve. My sewing, of course, is still 0.5 inches. Now I'll sew my band outward and do a top stitch to keep it in place. Cutting off any excess that it has been left by the band. I'm going to be doing the same thing for the band that is at the hemline of the dress. So I'm going to pin it in place, then sew by 0.5 inches, and then I'll turn it around and top stitch. And after I'm done sewing the bands, I'll go ahead and sew in my pockets. Straight up, we're going to start with our pocket placement. So our pocket placement, from under our armhole, you start by measuring 7 inches down, and then from that 7 inches you add 4 inches. So basically we're adding 13 inches down from our under armhole. Remember, the marking on the under armhole is based on our back length. Now from the side seam, we're going to be measuring in by 2 inches because we have 1 inch sewing allowance. So we're going to measure 2 inches inwards, and then we place our pocket. I have also folded all sides of the pocket so that I can have a very neat finish. But first I'm going to top stitch on the top part of the pocket so that we won't have any pieces coming out. So I've sewn the top side of my pocket so that I can have a very neat finish there. I'm going to align my pockets, making sure that both are on the same line, and then I would pin them down so that sewing will be much easier for me. No pockets will be moving while I'm sewing. I'm going to be sewing down the pockets on the front side of the dress. I'll sew it all around, making sure that I leave an opening on the top side for my hands to slide into my pockets. Now I'm going to be sewing the side of my dress, the side seams of my dress, putting them together, then sewing straight down so that I'll be able to finish up my dress. I'm using my tailor's chalk to mark my 1 inch sewing allowance so that I can be able to sew straight without making any mistakes. I will sew on that marking that I've made with my tailor's chalk, and then I'll do the same for the other side of the dress. And there you have it. My dress is complete, and next thing to do is wear it.